I farm about 450 acres, and it's really about a third corn, a third soybeans, and a third forages. So alfalfa and mixed hay ground. The farm where we're standing is the original homestead farm. This area was founded by Swedish immigrants, and I have a Swedish heritage on my father's side. We can trace it back to 1879. So I don't know how many generations that would be, 5 or 6 probably. I've got 3 children, they're all grown, they're all out of the house. The farm here has had a history of having livestock on it, so it's set up for livestock. And what I have now is cattle, so I have about 30 cow-calf pairs, and then I retain most of the offspring and then finish them out, and I sell the quarters and halves to consumers. The weather this year has been really challenging. It started off awesome. We had wonderful planting conditions, and maybe I should have known that it was too good to be true. It was very favorable, an early start, dry conditions. June was when things kind of took a turn though. It was very hot and very dry. Normally in June we always get at least a week of good rain weather to build up our soil profile, but this year that just didn't happen. It was windy and it was hot. So we're struggling for moisture right now. This is called the Chisago Lakes area, and the Chisago Lakes area is known for its lakes. The farm borders one of those lakes, which is North Center Lake. And the cattle previously, when my dad operated the farm, the cattle had access to the lake. When he kind of pared back, he abandoned that pasture. And then when I considered putting cattle back on that piece of ground, it was a question of, should they have access to the water or should they not? We decided that working through NRCS was better to protect that water, protect the quality of that water, and I had other ways that they could get water. So they helped with the establishment and the cost share agreement to put in fence to protect the wetland. With the NRCS, got introduced to Deb several years ago. I think I had some questions about installing some drain tile. Made sure it was done properly. I went up to the NRCS office and started a conversation with Deb. Deb is very good at explaining the different programs, things that are available to assist farmers. We started with a small project on some highly erodible ground that we have. The NRCS provided an incentive to enroll that highly erodible ground, and instead of doing row crops on that particular piece of ground, there's an incentive to put in a forage crop and do that and maintain it for 10 years in forage. So they helped with the establishment of that ground, getting that crop established, and then I've been maintaining that and harvesting that as many times as you harvest a forage crop. It's been really easy to work with Deb. One thing that I appreciate about Deb and the rest of the folks in the office is that there's really no pressure involved. I meet with Deb, when we're talking about a particular project, and she's really good about mentioning, oh, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that? So it kind of plants the seed of some other things that I could maybe consider doing, and I'm the type that needs to really think things through. Maybe do a little checking, do a little research on my own, and I think what Deb is really good at is allowing me time to work at my own speed and kind of adopt these practices as it kind of fits as I see the need.
What Max has done with NRCS is he came to our office probably 5 or 6 years ago. He was kind of just getting started with farming full-time, so I worked with Max to kind of just go through what some options might be, talk to him about his operation, what he does, what his goals are, what his objectives are. I came out, we did a site visit, we kind of looked at what some of the resource concerns were on his farm. He has livestock, he has crops, he has hay, so he's got a little bit of everything. We fenced out his cattle from a wetland, he's done no-till, he's implementing all kinds of soil health practices with residue management.
The first project that we worked on was establishing a forage crop on some highly erodible land, and that's right over there on the north side. And then the fence that I worked with NRCS on is the westmost part of the farm. That's probably the nicest fence that we have on the property. And then the no-till, everything you see on this farm, with the exception of one field where I had a heavy application of manure, which I felt I needed to work in, which is right behind the barn, and that's where the cattle overwinter. Everything else on the farm, the soybeans, I've got corn across the road and soybeans here, and then the corn that's to the west of the buildings here, that was all done through no-till practices. I get asked about no-till. There are other farmers in the area who have started doing no-till, and I think that people are curious. I think they want to know, they're asking about what kind of modifications I had to make to the equipment to start doing it. They ask about obviously how the yields were and just generally what it's like to do no-till as compared to conventional tillage. What are the differences? The reason I started looking at no-till is actually there was a local agronomist who I do work with, part of the co-op, the local co-op that I do business with. He's been doing no-till for 20 years, and they have a field day at his company, and I went there several years in a row and saw that his crops were performing as well or better than other crops in the area. So I thought, well, there's got to be something to this. I was always worried about a yield drag. That's the concern when you adopt a new practice, is how is it going to affect yield? But I got enough confidence built up that there was enough promising to at least give it a try. So when I gave it a try, I was pleasantly surprised. Then I also started thinking about, it seems it's harder and harder to get the crop in with the varying weather conditions. They're determined that it's so important to get crop in the ground timely, so as early as possible, especially for corn and soybeans. So I figured if I could save that time, instead of doing tillage practices, if I could go right into start planting when conditions were right, I felt that that would be a time savings as well as saving labor and fuel. Every time you're going to work the ground, you're going to lose moisture, and so I have to believe that I'm conserving water. The practices of no-till conserved water. Whether that shows up when it's so exceptionally dry I think remains to be seen.
It's been so dry, and I know Max and a lot of other farmers around here have had such a difficult time with no rain, and it shows in the crops. The soybeans are real small, and the hay crops are a lot lower yielding than they typically are at this time. So it really affects the farms around here, and the pastures never really got a good start from the beginning. It takes a lot to keep going when you have this inclement weather that is out of your control, but you still push on and do what you can, and you keep going. Minnesota is such a state of extremes, it seems, that one year we're fighting soil erosion from too much rain that washes topsoil off the fields, and this year we have no rain, so we're struggling with having crops that produce any sort of mass. We go from a year of downpouring rain every other day where it's hard to get a crop in, to this year everybody got their crops planted, but then it never rained, so it's always a struggle. Max has done so many great things. I really like that he's always just willing to try to understand more and to learn more. We've had a number of soil health days throughout the years, and he's always attended them and has always been eager to learn or ask questions. So he's used those things that he's picked up and he's implemented it on his own land. So by doing the residue management and by doing some of these other conservation practices, he's just really helping make his farm profitable and improve the soil quality and do what he can with the acres that he has.
I think it's always good to be constantly learning and trying new practices. It can be frustrating when you're a farmer. You kind of understand the importance of the topsoil, and you can, if you pay attention, you can see over the years that topsoil has a tendency to get eroded. You lose it, and when you're farming, you're going to witness erosion if you're doing conventional tillage. You're going to see your dirt blowing away on a strong wind, and I just thought that's not a good feeling. And I thought, is there something that I could do to help prevent that? And no-till is not all that new. It's very common in other parts of the country, so it just made sense that knowing some people who have tried it and had success with it, that it seemed like for all the benefits, time, labor, cost, and if I could get the comparable yields, I thought it was something I should definitely look into.
Max has tried no-till in the past. He dedicated to enroll most of his crops. There's about 280 acres that he's planted no-till for his corn and beans this year, and that program through NRCS extends 2 more years. Max's conservation practices were funded through the EQIP program, the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, which provides a payment rate for a whole gamut of different conservation practices. With our EQIP funding, how the program works is that Max installs the conservation practice, and then he receives a payment rate based off of generally a 50% cost share rate as a national payment rate. He gets a payment rate per acre per year for the no-till, and he received a payment per acre for seeding down the row crop area to permanent hay with an approved conservation seeding plan with our office. And then the fence, he worked with our office to do the technical design for that fence. He implemented it on his own. That wasn't through any of our programs, but he really just wanted to do the right thing and take his cattle out of that surface water. NRCS can provide just plain technical assistance. They don't have to be tied to a program or a contract. We can come out, do a site visit, and work with the landowner on just some ideas and suggestions on how to correct a resource concern. Max's cattle had free range access to the pasture that also included this wetland area with a little pond. So we wanted to work with him to exclude his cattle from having free access to that surface water. So he installed about 1,300 feet of fence that excluded his cattle from that area. Now they have clean, fresh water through a well rather than having access to that pond. The Mississippi River Basin Healthy Watersheds Initiative, it's an initiative that helps improve water quality, restore wetlands, enhance wildlife habitat, and sustain productivity on ag land. So it works collaboratively with small watersheds throughout the whole Mississippi River Basin and works with NRCS and partners to find these projects and these farms that will implement these conservation practices, that will do those things, that will improve water quality. If it's through sediment reduction or keeping the soil on the land, reducing nutrient loss from runoff, enhancing wildlife habitat or restoring wetlands, all those things improve the water that eventually gets to the Mississippi River, which eventually flows down into the Gulf of Mexico that has some impairments and water quality issues. So anything we can do upland from that area all contributes to helping the Mississippi River stay healthy. Max's projects fall into that initiative, so that provided a little bit more of an incentive for dedicated funds to implement these conservation practices. NRCS helps people with ag land. You can have no experience, you can have a ton of experience. There's conservation practices that we can implement to correct any kind of resource concern. What our office and every office in the county likes to do is meet with you on your farm, take an inventory of what resource concerns exist, and write a conservation plan with how we can implement things to correct that. So sometimes it's followed by funding through a conservation program, and sometimes it's just technical assistance depending on what the goals are of the producer. So I recommend that anybody that's interested in improving their soil, improving their land, their livestock, helping wildlife, or improving water quality, visit your local conservation office, your NRCS office, or your soil and water district, and somebody can set you up with a site visit and to help kind of steer you in the right direction for implementing a conservation plan on your farm.
I don't see any downside of talking to the NRCS. From my experience, as I mentioned, there's really no pressure. I think that they can open your eyes or point you in directions of resources that might be available to you. And what I always think of it as, it can be that one little thing, the little extra incentive that can be provided for you to try something that maybe you haven't tried before. As I mentioned, Deb has been really good about planting little seeds, and one thing we've talked about is maybe some rotational grazing. I do it on a little small scale here, but I don't really have the infrastructure set up, so that's something that we have talked about maybe looking at down the road, is if I could get a more intensive rotational grazing to try and better utilize the pastures that we have.
I would definitely consider Max's farm a success story, and there's always more that we can do with his cattle, with his pastures, maybe implementing some additional cover crops or soil health practices. There's always something more we can do. He's done a lot, but it's exciting to think about what else we can try.
I would definitely think that other farmers should consider some of these practices, or at least giving them a try. I'm not going to tell anybody what they should do on their particular farm, but certainly learning about what the different opportunities are, what different things are available. I think knowledge is always a good thing. So if you could learn more, maybe you'll find something that would be a good fit for your particular farm.